an overused saying, but I'll use it again. Why not? Um, Karl von Clausewitz wrote a book called On War. He's a Prussian strategist from the Napoleonic era, but many of his maxims are timeless, including the one that basically goes, war is an extension of politics by other means. In short, if you're a geopolitical analyst and you're looking at purely military affairs on the battlefield, you're missing the bigger picture. It's all about politics. Um, I mean, you know, Netanyahu might be able to say that, we have won more tactical engagements in Gaza than Hamas has. They might be able to say that they've won a series of tactical engagements against Hezbollah. Um, they can't say that about Iran yet, but they're going to try. Maybe if they attack the Houthi, they can say, we've launched successful military strikes against, the Houthi ports and things of that nature. But the day after each one of these tactical victories, you have to ask yourself, is Israel winning? And the answer is no. They haven't won militarily. Stringing together a series of tactical victories does not a strategic victory make. I mean, America learned that lesson in Vietnam, where very rarely did we suffer a tactical defeat. Almost every engagement we had with the enemy resulted in the Americans controlling the battle space afterwards. But that wasn't what it was about. It wasn't about, holding Hill 861 or, clearing, Valley X. It was about defeating the enemy. And we never defeated the Viet Cong, and we never defeated the North Vietnamese, and therefore we lost the Vietnamese War. Why? Not because of the military per se, but because of the political aspects of it. The American people basically lost the will to continue the fight. We exhausted ourselves, and so we left, and the Vietnamese won. Israel has said that its definition of victory with Hamas is the physical destruction of Hamas as a military organization or terrorist organization, to use the Israeli terms, and its elimination as a politically viable entity. This is not the case. Hamas is very much alive and well and living and fighting. The Israelis don't control Gaza. I think they've learned the hard lesson that simply parking yourself on the top doesn't mean you control what's underneath. And the Hamas is inflicting a death by 1,000 cuts on the Israelis. Hamas politically is more viable today than it has been ever in its existence. It's done more to create the circumstances for the existence of a Palestinian state than any other Palestinian or entity or Palestinian ally. So Israel, it's clear Israel has lost the war. If we were judged today, they've lost because they haven't achieved their political objectives, and Hamas is achieving its political objectives. You can't discern victory simply by looking at the battlefield. The same thing with Hezbollah. Israel now has said that it seeks the physical removal of Hezbollah from south of the Litani River, and they seek to destroy Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. One of the metrics used, in addition to seizing territory in southern Lebanon, is to create the conditions conducive to the return of 60,000 Israeli settlers who reside in the north who have been evacuated. In order to do that, you have to eliminate Hezbollah's ability to fire rockets into northern Israel. Israel somehow believes that occupying Lebanon up to the Litani River would somehow achieve that objective without acknowledging that technology has changed, that that Hezbollah possesses the ability to strike Israel from locations that are north of the Litani River. So, but even then, let's take a look at what they've done. They haven't succeeded in the south. They're bogged down. They're fighting on terrain that Hezbollah's had 16 years to 18 years to prepare for this fight. There's not a valley, a village, a street, a hilltop, a nook, a cranny in that battle space that Hezbollah hasn't walked over and assessed how we can get a mortar shell to land here. Where does the mortar have to be? What coordinates do we have to put into the mortar? What's it? What elevation, etc. They've test fired everything so that when the Israelis come running up the hill and they go, take cover here, they're in a place, and the Lebanese go, well, that's pre-targeted zone, Alpha Alpha 012, fire, boom, bam, death. This is what Israel's moving into. And they tried it in 2006. They failed, and I anticipate that they will fail again. Iran, Israel's never had to deal with an Iran that was capable of striking it decisively. And there's nothing Israel can do to stop it. The missile defense shield doesn't work. This is a reality. And if they want to extend it, Israel's going to find that there is a soft underbelly, that the next targets won't be, hardened aircraft shelters on a military base, but rather, soft, water purification plants, energy production plants, power plants, distribution plants, other critical infrastructure. And then that's the end of Israel as a modern nation state. When Israel loses the ability to generate electricity, there is no electricity in Israel. When Israel loses the ability to pump fresh water into the households, there is no fresh water. There is no sewage. Israel ceases to function as a modern nation state. How is this victory? Israel is weaker today than it has ever been at any time in its life. The Houthi have shut down, effectively embargoed Israel's second largest port, Eilat, in the south. Haifa is under attack now. So that port facility is no longer. Insurance companies are going to be like, well, we can't insure you going into Haifa anymore because there's rockets coming down, and we can't afford to pay the premiums. Israel, $67 billion economic hit over the course of the last year, and it's going to get worse. On September 9th, 2003, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech about an initiative that Joe Biden had put forward at the G20 summit in New Delhi, the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor. He said, this will change the face of the Middle East and Israel forever. This is the greatest single event in Israel's history. These are his quotes. Well, the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor isn't going to happen ever because of Israel. What Netanyahu is ignoring, the reason why France and other nations are turning their back on this, Israel has exposed to the world its reality. It's a brutal apartheid genocidal regime. That's it. The Israeli people have exposed themselves as people who support and sustain a apartheid regime that commits genocide. And the world is disgusted by this. Even a world that is accustomed to the slaughter of Arabs. I mean, let's just be clear about it. The world doesn't blink when Arabs die. Hell, if we blinked when Arabs died, we would blink a long time ago. The number of 40,000 dead Palestinian civilians is low. I mean, there's people now saying, nah, man, when you get under that rubble and you take a look at Gaza and tell me today, that ain't 40,000. When you start removing the rubble and you find the bodies, you'll find that maybe 180,000 people have been killed. Maybe more. We don't know. But look what Israel's done. And nobody's saying anything. I mean, I did a little demonstration here, but, really, I think we just gave up a long time ago caring about Arabs. We didn't care about 500,000 Iraqi children back in the 1990s when Madeleine Albright said it was a price we were willing to pay to overthrow Saddam Hussein, to starve to death, allow them to lie lingering deaths of disease, dysentery, because we would deny them the medicines they needed to cure these simple things. 500,000 Iraqi babies sure didn't sway America. We didn't lose any sleep. Oh, that's too bad. That's just a number. 180,000 dead Palestinians, just a number. We don't attach faces to them. We don't say they're people. It's just a number. It's a statistic. They're Arabs. They die all the time anyways. And again, how can we care about the Palestinian people more than the Egyptians? How can we care about the Palestinian people more than the Saudis, more than the Kuwaitis, more than the Jordanians? The Arabs don't care about the Palestinian people. Why should we care about the Palestinian people? We should care about the Arabs that kowtow to us, that subordinate their national interests to us, that give us the oil, that give us access to military bases, to do what we want them to do. Why should we care about the Palestinian people? And we don't care about the Palestinian people. What we care about is our own reputations. And when the world starts to wake up to the reality that what is happening with the Palestinians is genocide, then leaders like Emmanuel Macron start to, understand, well, we have to say something, we have to do something. It appears. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. BRICS. BRICS is why. BRICS is creating a gravitational center, a new gravitational reality in the global geopolitical community that is more than just economics. It's achieved a political status, and the political status has to take into account now how the world feels about Israel. And the global South is rejecting what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people. And they're creating a new moral standard. America used to say, we're the moral standard. We're the moral center of the world. We're democracy. Joe Biden, in his 2022 national security strategy statement, democracy is how we define ourselves to the world. The world will rally to us because of our, the democracy we bring, the shining city on the hill. It's all been shown to be a lie. We're not a shining city. We're a ghetto. We're not a democracy. We're an autocracy. And when it comes to the rest of the world, we're a dictatorship. We dictate, you do, or we bomb you or sanction you. That's how America interfaces with the world. It's not democracy. We don't care what you think. We don't care anything about you. We don't even like you. And then suddenly we're surprised when the world says, well, we don't support this American hegemony anymore. We think you suck. So we're going to gravitate over here to BRICS. And that gravitational pull is now causing problems for America's allies in Europe and around the world, who are saying, wait a minute, not so fast. We actually believe in preventing genocide. So Macron came out with his statement. But what did he do as soon as Netanyahu came on and gave his little, whiny talk? Macron folded. They're selling them weapons. They'll never stop selling them weapons because they don't care about Arabs. I'm just going to say it one more time. And it's not just Arabs. We don't care about Persians. We don't care about anybody from that part of the world. You're foreign to us, especially Muslims. What was the last time, and I say this to an American audience, but I'll say it to a European audience too. When was the last time Christians from the United States or Europe voluntarily just got up and went to the local mosque, knocked on the door and said, hey, is the imam in? I'd like to talk about your congregation, you as a community, how you guys are doing. Is there anything we can do to help you? Or you could run into problems. Welcome to the community. You've been here for how long? 40 years, and we never noticed you because you're Muslim. But how many people have reached out and just tried to understand, reach across and say, hey, we got a thing going on at our church here next week. Why don't you guys come over and afterwards we'll have a little picnic together and just get to know one another. We believe in the same God. So let's talk about, reach out to the Jewish synagogue and get everybody together and say, hey, what's up? Yahweh is great. Allah is great. It's the same thing, same person. According to the books, God is God. We don't do that because somehow, while we've conditioned ourselves to accept the Jews, because it's part of the Judeo-Christian ethic we like to talk about, we condemn the Muslims. They're different. It's racism. It's chauvinism of the worst, national chauvinism of the worst sort. But that's the reality. We in the West, primarily white people, don't care about brown people, Muslims in the Middle East. You know who does? The brown and yellow people around the world, the black people in Africa, because they're all used to the racism coming from the great white hope, the great white Bwana, the white guy who colonized them and continues to believe that they serve as colonies. They're used to that, and so they work together because they've been oppressed by the same enemy. They work together just fine. They get along with each other just fine. They don't think of people as black, brown, yellow. I guess they do. There's racism everywhere, but they do work together much better than we do because it's based upon equality. consensus driven, as opposed to, the Great White Hope out of Washington, D.C. dictating solutions. Because even when we had a black president, we were still the Great White Hope.
Yeah. We know that tomorrow Grant going to be in Pentagon and he's going to talk with Americans. Do we know that if the Biden administration was successful in avoiding the conflict, the escalations between Iran and Israel?
I mean, we'll find out. I don't know. I think, Netanyahu's boxed himself into a corner and he's going to have to do something. I think the most recent statement is that he's going to strike primarily military industrial, and military production sites, not understanding that when the Iranians said, "You bomb us, we're taking out your infrastructure." Literally, it's a loaded gun up against the Israelis' head. Doesn't matter. If you bomb nuclear sites, if you bomb oil, that'll get you one kind of retaliation. It'll be more regional in nature, existential. But if you just attack Iran already said you can't attack us. It's not like we're going to give you permission to attack us. If you attack us, we're taking out your infrastructure. We'll take out your power plants, water desalination, distribution, energy production. We'll take it out. Now, whether Iran does that or not, I don't know. But hey, they fired 200 missiles into Israel the other day, showed they can do it. They're not afraid of it. They'll do it again. This time, I think they'll come in with more missiles, better missiles. And I mean, this time they fired a whole bunch. The Iranians are smarter than the average dog. And I don't mean that. That was just an American saying. I'm not calling anybody dogs. They're smarter than the average person. They fired a whole bunch of older liquid missiles. I'd like to wish I could talk to the Israelis about what their intercept points are for their various systems, because what happens with a liquid system is that it fires, and then at some point in time it runs out of fuel, or you can do a cutoff, and so it stops the propulsion. And then the Iranian missiles, they separate the warhead. So now you're the Israelis, and you got your radar, and you're tracking the singularity in, and then it separates. Now you have two targets, and that complicates things, because now, are you going to target the big one? Or are you going to target the little one? How do you reorient to the little one? A lot of problems, especially when you have 200 coming at the time and you get the separation. And then the warheads that separate, they maneuver, they accelerate, they deploy decoys. These were all the older missiles that the Iranians fired, and most of them hit their targets, which means that they, I think, have designed their warhead separation moment to be at the prime intercept moment, meaning that they are deliberately, just through the mere operation of the system, confusing and nullifying the Israeli missile defense system. But the important thing is they did that with their older systems. I think they fired a handful of their new weapons to hit some critical targets. But the next time around, not only will they be firing these systems, but they'll be firing even more of their advanced systems. And they've already shown that Israel and the United States can't defend against this. Yeah, you'll get one or two, but lucky hits. But initially they said that they shot down 90%, and I think I went, well, wait a minute. Now if they only fired 200, let's go maximum number 200, 180 to 200. 10% of 200 is 20. That means there are only 20 impacts, but I can count 32 at Nevatim alone. You're lying. You're lying. You're not telling the truth. And then there's another 32 at the other airfield. Oh my God, that's 64. And then there's another 32. Now we're getting close to 50% already got through. We already done the full calculation. You're lying. I mean, that's the reality. The Israelis and the Americans lied. The Iranians successfully attacked the targets they wanted to attack, achieving the results they wanted to achieve, which wasn't death and destruction, but sending a signal that the next time we do this and we put 32 missiles, warheads on a target, it's not going to be an airfield per se. It's going to be your power plant. And there's no hardened aircraft shelters at a power plant. When it hits, the whole plant disappears. And then we'll do 32 more at this power plant. You only have 5 power plants in Israel. We'll take them all out. How do you generate electricity at that point in time? You don't. And then what happens when we hit all of your desalination plants? You can't generate fresh water anymore. What happens when we blow up your gas production, your oil production, your energy? Suddenly Israel doesn't exist anymore. And Iran can do that right now. Right now, lights out. Well, that's the reality of the situation we're in, and the Israelis know it. So I think, if the Israelis want to carry out that attack, there has to be some calculus going on that I'm not aware of. And I don't think that calculus includes America joining them in attacking Iran. Why? Because all that death and destruction I just talked about can be put on every single American base in the region, and we don't have the missile defense to protect it. We got a handful of Patriot batteries. We got a couple Aegis ships. The ships will be sunk. The Patriot batteries will be destroyed, and Al Udeid Air Base will cease to exist. Every aircraft we have on there will be gone. And any base we go off to, whether one in Kuwait or if we flee to Saudi Arabia, we'll take those out. Iran will take those out too. And then they'll, we've got a couple thousand Americans in Iraq and Syria that are literally living hostages. At any time, the popular militias want, they can overrun these facilities. That, by overrun, I mean they come over the wall, they come through, and they kill, capture everybody inside. And the battle will be over that quick. There's nothing that can be done to save these Americans. They're literally living hostages. And what American president wants to turn to the American people and say, well, last night, to appease the genocidal, maniacal regime in Tel Aviv, I authorized American forces to participate in a futile effort to shut down Iran's military capabilities. As a result, we've lost 10,000 dead. Blame me. In an election year, on the eve of national elections, that's not a conversation the president wants to have with the American people. So I don't know what's going on with the Israelis, but I would say this, that it's my assessment that if they attack Iran, they commit suicide, and they know that. So maybe they're not going to attack Iran. They're going to try and bluff this attack to get the most concessions they possibly can out of the Biden administration.
Is Iran getting prepared to respond to Israel if they attack them with nuclear weapons?
If Israel attacks Iran with nuclear weapons?
Because we've heard, it seems that there are some rumors that Iran has tested a nuclear bomb.
The problem with that test, there's two major problems with that test. One is the diversion of nuclear material away from the International Atomic Energy Agency's ongoing monitoring regime. Yes, the Iranians have blocked IAEA inspectors from looking at centrifuge production and other things that were never part of safeguards, always part of the expanded inspection regime under the JCPOA, but the Iran nuclear deal. But the actual safeguards agreement is designed to account for the totality of nuclear material in Iran. And that safeguards agreement is still there, still in place. Inspectors are still going in, and there's been no talk about the diversion. And remember, this wouldn't be insignificant diversion. This would be a massive diversion of a particular, component. This is the 60% enriched UF6, uranium hexafluoride, that Iran has produced, ostensibly to support the production of metal fuel plates for a research reactor in Tehran. But there's more, they have more there than that. The IAEA has assessed that Iran could produce up to 3 nuclear weapons, I think by now up to 5 nuclear weapons using this material, but it would have to be diverted. So there's been no talk about massive diversions. And unless Iran had a totally secret, uranium enrichment program, which is highly unlikely because of, again, the fact that the JCPOA was pretty comprehensive in tracking this kind of stuff. And even, since they've done that, you'd have to divert material. There'd have to be a whole new source of uranium dioxide and, the yellow cake and all these things. So without diversion, you don't make the bomb. So where'd the bomb come from? Well, the other thing is the earthquake in question was 10 miles below the surface. The deepest oil well is like 7.7 miles. The idea that the Iranians are going to drill a borehole down 10 miles and put, a device down there with all the testing mechanisms and everything, and then without being detected? No. So I think that was an earthquake. Now I know there's going to be people come out and talk about the seismic wave, and there was no compression wave in the fore and all that stuff. I mean that's how can I debate that? I'm just saying that 10 miles below the surface, unprecedented, unlikely, and the lack of diversion makes me say that whatever happened, my money is that it wasn't an Iranian nuclear test. But back in May, the former foreign minister of Iran, currently a member of the Expediency Discernment Council, which is a constitutionally mandated body that advises the supreme leader on a variety of issues, said, if Israel ever attacks our nuclear infrastructure, we will have to make adjustments to our nuclear posture. The implication was that Iran would make a nuclear bomb in response. Since then, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, or a senior member of the Revolutionary Guard, came out and said that the current policy continues to be no nuclear weapon, but we are prepared for a time when realities change and people threaten the existence of the Islamic Republic. And if that happens, we would obviously change what we're doing. I don't think the Iranians make these statements in a vacuum. I think these statements are made about the time that the former foreign minister made his statement. There was talk about Iran procuring specific components usable in a nuclear device, high explosive components. Again, we don't have IAEA inspectors monitoring Iran's explosive production capabilities, and I think Iran could very easily, in a very short period of time, and I believe they already have done, assembled basically 3 to 5 nuclear devices minus the fissile material. Now, I don't know what design they're going to use. Are they going to use a spherical compression? Or use a gun device? I don't know. The easiest one is the gun device. The other one, where you have to make the different lenses, requires a lot of testing. If you want to do a quick boom bomb, a gun device, and they have the uranium to do it. The spherical device generally can be like a plutonium weapon that requires processing of spent uranium fuel rods. Again, a whole other level of stuff that Iran could do, but it's too complicated for a quick turnaround. My bet is a gun device is going to produce a yield of 15, 20 kilotons, enough to destroy all of Tel Aviv, Haifa, Eilat, Central Israel, Beersheba, Dimona. That's it. And if Israel uses a nuclear weapon against Iran, I can pretty much guarantee that Iran will destroy all of Israel. Israel will cease to exist. That's a guarantee. And that's not me just speaking out, thin air. The Iranians have pretty much said that. And again, the Iranians aren't going to make this statement. The Iranians, when they made the decision to attack on October 1st, that decision was made as part and parcel of a strategic understanding of what could happen because of this, up to and including Israel using nuclear weapons in response. Iran has already factored in all of these possibilities, and they have scenarios for each one. The second Israel started talking about the potential of using nuclear weapons, I think things have been triggered inside Iran. I'd be very curious to hear from the IAEA and their report card on potential diversion. I'd like to know when the last time they did a full accounting of Iran's UF6 is 60% enriched uranium hexafluoride. I'd like to know the last time they did that. I'd like to know the last time they inspected the underground cascades that are specifically designed to produce the high enriched uranium. Because if I were the Iranians, I would have already begun the process of making highly enriched uranium. I would have already, just statements of the Israelis alone said, okay, let's do it. And I would have quietly sent out signals to my Persian Gulf neighbors that you don't want to let the United States use bases, and you don't want to have Israel attacking our oil infrastructure, because from a self-preservation standpoint, we have to take out everybody's oil infrastructure. We can't allow ourselves to be isolated that way. For deterrence to work, the world has to understand we will take everything out. Therefore, if we are attacked, we will take everything out, which creates global economic chaos, high prices, the whole works. But we'll see. But I think Iran will be a nuclear power before the year is out. They have no choice. Israel has behaved in a totally irresponsible fashion. They're going to get more and more desperate as they continue to fail across the board. The other thing that has to happen is that the United States and the world now have to stand up and confront Israel on its nuclear weapons program. We can't allow it to exist anymore. It's irresponsible. And I would say at the same time, once we target Israel's nuclear weapons program, we have to go to the Iranians and say, you don't get one either. That's the deal. We will verifiably dismantle this, but we have to come in and make sure you don't have one, and nobody else gets one too. And then, we have to begin this process, but we can't allow Israel to have these nuclear weapons anymore. It's a genocidal, insane state full of hatred, and it's desperate. These are people that view the Arabs as subhumans. They speak of Amalek, the need to eradicate these threats, and the fact that they even consider using nuclear weapons preemptively against Iran makes them, it disqualifies them as responsible nation state.
You talk about the talks and the way that we can avoid a nuclear race in the Middle East. Do you think that was Israel successful in sabotaging what the talks between Washington and Iran by these assassinations, the assassination in Iran and in Beirut?
I think that the Iranians have always held the door open for diplomatic relations with the United States. Even Raisi was willing to sit down and talk. I don't think, but the Iranians have long ago lost any notion that the United States is a serious negotiator. That they just don't believe us anymore. Dating all the way back to the JCPOA, which they signed and they implemented in good faith, but they knew from the beginning the United States would never ever follow through. The sunset clauses were a suicide pill for the United States, because the U.S. had said Iran will never be allowed to have these capabilities, and yet the agreement allowed Iran to have capabilities America said they'll never be allowed to have. So you knew at some point in time, if you're Iranian, that the United States would intervene and pull out. Barack Obama forecast that. He said, when the time comes for the sunset clauses to expire, we will reevaluate this. I'm like, what is there to reevaluate? You made an agreement. Why do you have to reevaluate it if you never intended to, unless you never intended to, go forward? And that's the truth. The United States never did. So, how do you sabotage something that the other side understands will never manifest itself? Iran never expected the United States to do anything. I will say in the short term, it appears that the Iranian president, the new Iranian president, was told by the United States that if they hold back on retaliating against Israel's assassination of a senior Hamas official in Tehran, that the United States would be able to get a ceasefire arranged, and that get the conflict to drive down. That would be the price Iran would pay by not retaliating to Israel. Peace would break out. And he went back to a skeptical leadership in Iran and said, this is the deal, I'd like to pursue it. And they went with it. He actually came to the General Assembly debate in New York and was talking about sitting down, negotiating, and doing things. And then Israel assassinated Hassan Nasrallah. After Hassan Nasrallah agreed to the ceasefire that the United States said they were trying to broker, after Netanyahu was briefed on Hassan Nasrallah's agreement, he still ordered the assassination. And at that point in time, the Iranians understood that the United States could never again be trusted, and they made the decision to retaliate. But the United States did make certain things, promised certain things to Iran if it wouldn't attack. The United States failed to deliver. It turns out the United States lied the entire time. We had no expectation to believe Israel would ever accept a ceasefire. We knew about the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. We did nothing to stop it. I mean, we're literally the worst nation on the planet.
Do you think that with this assassination of Nasrallah and his commanders, are they still in a disarray, or they're just finding their strategy against Israel?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's not easy to lose your senior leadership, but Hezbollah is a resistance organization. Nasrallah has said for years that he is a living martyr, that he expects to die. He knows that Israel's been targeting him. Israel has targeted him in the past. As an organization, Hezbollah has anticipated this. They have a chain of command, and you saw how they reacted. They replaced him. That guy was killed. They replaced him. That guy was killed. So they went to a shared leadership position where they're not advertising who the shared leadership is. Meanwhile, the cellular structure of Hezbollah is such that the different entities in Hezbollah still operate. They still coordinate. They still function. You see, they haven't lost cohesion in their defense of southern Lebanon. They still are able to launch rocket attacks against Israel. I mean, has Israel, inflicted harm? Of course they have. I mean, you have to give hats off to the Israeli intelligence for being able to do this targeting. But Hezbollah has been preparing for this war for, since 2006, for 18 years. And I don't think anything Israel's done changes 18 years of preparation in a organizational structure that's designed to operate independent of central planning and leadership.
Scott, when you look at the situation in Gaza right now, after 12 months, a year in this conflict, how do you find the situation in Gaza? Because at the same time, Israel is fighting Hezbollah, they're attacking Gaza as well. And it seems that with this conflict with Iran, together with Hezbollah, everybody's just forgetting about Gaza and what's going on right now in Gaza. What's your assessment of the Israeli strategy in Gaza? Are they trying to attack at the same time Hezbollah and Gazans, or they're focused on Hezbollah right now?
Well, no, clearly they're doing both. Hamas hasn't gone away. Hamas continues to resist. The Israelis are continuing operations. It appears Israel is focused on securing the Philadelphia corridor, which connects Gaza to Egypt. And then they've dug a corridor in the middle of, splitting Gaza in half, a northern half and the southern half. And this appears to be Israel's long-term strategy to focus on that. But Hamas hasn't gone away. The tunnels are still there. Some people estimate that 80% of the original tunnels are in place. Hamas has apparently had success recruiting amongst the population of Gaza to replace fighters that have been lost. The resistance has the ability to resupply, and it's there. It hasn't been defeated. Hezbollah always hesitated to, the reason why they didn't jump to escalation is, one, they wanted to protect the people of Lebanon from what's happening now, collective punishment and total violation of international law, slaughtering thousands of innocent Lebanese who have nothing to do with Hezbollah. But that's how Israel operates. But Hezbollah wanted to avoid this kind of escalation, do a managed escalation at the front. It's clear that Israel has opted for, increasing the scope and scale of its conflict with Hezbollah. And what's going to happen is that fewer people are going to be talking about what's going on in Gaza. This has always been something that Hezbollah and Iran wanted to avoid. If Israel and Iran get involved in the fight, people stop talking about what's going on in Lebanon. Right now we're speaking of the thousands of people who are dying in Lebanon and somehow forgetting the 40 to 180,000 Palestinians that died in Gaza. And if we get into see a broader conflict between Israel and Iran, we'll stop talking about Lebanon. We'll be talking about this and energy security and the impact on, global energy markets. this is always the risk of escalation, is that you lose sight of the original fight, which was to create a Palestine. But then what happens is the potential of Palestine becoming, because if you can say, well, we can reverse engineer all of this back down to a solution in Gaza, suddenly you have more political imperative to have a solution in Gaza. So it's a gamble, because once you get into global energy markets and strategic conflict between Israel and Iran, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to reverse engineer that back to Gaza and people just forget about Gaza. But if the cure is resolving the Palestine issue, and then Iran says, well, then we no longer need to be in a conflict. Hezbollah says we no longer need to be in a conflict, and we can bottle it up. Maybe that's what's needed, because right now what's happening isn't working on either front. You have the world giving lip service to the need for the creation of a Palestinian state, but you have nothing really practical taking place. And you can't, as long as Benjamin Netanyahu is the prime minister.
Scott, there is a division between analysts, political and military analysts, when it comes to the case of Israel. In your opinion, I talked with Michael Hodson, Gilbert Doctorow, and Larry Johnson. They have different ideas, and Ambassador Chas Freeman, together with Larry Johnson, they're thinking that the United States Israeli lobby is in charge of what's going on in the Middle East. And on the other hand, we have Michael Hodson and Gilbert. They're talking about that the United States is in charge of what's going on in the Middle East. In your assessment, is the military-industrial complex, is the Israeli lobby in the United States, is Israeli government in charge of what's going on? Who's running the show, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think it's black and white. I think there's, I can say this. I don't know, the background of all these people, what their, scope and scale of their experiences are. I know that, Gilbert Doctorow was a successful businessman in Russia, and that's it. and now he's, talking about things. I don't know what his background is. I know that when I resigned from my position as a UN weapons inspector in 1998, that I was courted by the Israeli lobby in a major way. I was brought into the inside of AIPAC, to the Washington Near East Institute, and saw their interaction, watched as they lobbied senators. I watched how Trent Lott, who at the time was the Senate Majority Leader, basically did whatever it took to appease the Israeli lobby. I saw how AIPAC insinuated itself into every aspect of the mass media market. I saw how they fundraised. I saw how they did everything they do. Because for a moment there, I guess they thought that I would play their game. And then when they realized I wouldn't play the game, all the doors slammed shut. But for a brief while, I saw the reality of the pro-Israeli lobby and the influence that they have everywhere. They're everywhere. They control everything. But at the same time, within the United States, within the establishment, there are elements that are just vehemently anti-Israel, where the lobby hasn't broken into, and these are deeply entrenched things. And that's when you get into energy security. As strong as the Israeli lobby is, they're not as strong as ExxonMobil, Standard. When we're talking hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars of economic potential with a global scale, the Israeli lobby doesn't control them. The Israeli lobby doesn't control the pharmaceutical industry. The Israeli lobby doesn't control a whole bunch of things in the United States. They have a very limited, span of control and influence on things that pertains particularly to Israel. The Israeli lobby does not control the Pentagon. I'll just make that absolutely clear. The Israeli lobby doesn't control the Pentagon. They may have the ability to influence the Pentagon. They've sucked parasites here, there, and everywhere. They don't control the Pentagon. And they don't control the military-industrial complex. As much, I can tell you that when you take a look at the amount of money we send to Israel, it pales in comparison with the other contracts that we put around the world. I mean, what it was, $3.8 billion a year is our military sales to Israel. We conclude contracts bigger than that with other people, on a monthly basis. So the idea that the military-industrial complex is beholden to Israel is absurd. The Israelis have a lot of influence, but there's a lot of independent. The big thing is on policy that impacts Israel. Where a specific policy impacts Israel, the lobby has a tremendous amount of influence. But I will tell you right now that we did not invade Iraq because of Israel. I mean, Israel played a role in it, a supporting role. But I remind people that up until 1998, the Israelis were actually working with the United Nations to achieve the disarmament of Iraq in opposition to the American policy of regime change. You see, the Israelis had a regime change policy in place that was brought to fruition right after the Gulf War ended. When Yuri Sergey, the commander of military intelligence, made a decision that they need to kill Saddam Hussein. And from 1991 to 1993, the Israelis bent over backwards to kill him. They put in special forces teams. They reconned the area. They got right up to Aujah and Tikrit and picked the assassination spot. They knew how they're going to fly in, where their guys are going to be. They picked the event. It was the death of Saddam's uncle. There was going to be a funeral. The funeral procession was going to come down by Aujah, and the assassination teams were going to take him out with these special designed rockets. Sayat Matkel guys working with Golani, working with the guys that are going to flee to the desert, get on helicopters and go home. They did rehearsals, live rehearsals, where they put teams on the ground to do it. I know. I met the guys that did it. And they were going to kill this guy, kill Saddam. And then in their final dry rehearsal, live fire, it wasn't supposed to be live fire. It was supposed to be just a rehearsal with all the political people there. They had a live fire accident. They fired a rocket towards the car that was carrying the simulated Saddam, and it was a real thing. Bam, they killed him, killed a bunch of the commandos, and that was the end of the mission. Then people leaked it to the press, and once you leaked it to the press, that was it. Can't do it again. And at that point in time, the Israelis made the decision that they have to find another way to deal with the problem of Saddam. And that's when, through a variety of means, including me leading, participating, I can't say I led it. I was one of three people when it was my idea. Two other UN officials came with me to meet with Yuri Sergey and other senior Israelis to talk about why don't they try the disarmament route. And we convinced the Israelis that disarmament was the best way to go forward. And from 1994 to 1998, I traveled to Israel all the time, met with these guys. I met with the guy that was supposed to be Saddam, the guy who thought like Saddam. And by the end, what the Israelis said is that Saddam's a rational actor, not suicidal, and that he can be contained through a combination of, if we disarm him and lift the sanctions, then enough economic incentives can be put to place on Saddam to prevent him from doing other things. That was the Israeli position in 1998. In 3 years after I left, they changed and they flipped and they said, oh, they have weapons of mass destruction, even though they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. But we didn't go to real war because Israel said they had weapons of mass destruction. During the entire decade of the 90s, when I was working with the Israelis to disarm Iraq, the United States was working to get rid of Saddam Hussein because he was a political problem for the United States. We went to war in Iraq not for Israel. We went to war in Iraq for oil and regional dominance. Now, people say, well, that's part of the project for New American Century and all this stuff. Yes, that's peripheral. But America goes to war for America. That's what people need to understand. So I take vehement disagreement with businessmen turned academics turned geopolitical analysis who think they know how American military strategy works. They don't. You know who does? Chas Freeman, Larry Johnson. Those are the guys. I'll trust their judgments more than I'll trust Dr. Owen. What was the other guy? Hudson. Again, I have nothing against them. I respect their judgment. I'll read them with great interest. But I'm just saying that my personal experience, having fought a war for Israel, just never forget what the 1991 Gulf War, the war that I fought was an anti-missile campaign, which was all about preventing missiles from being fired into Israel. And so, that was literally what we were doing on the ground in Western Iraq was for the direct benefit to keep Israel out of the war. So I've been in a war on behalf of Israel. But I can also tell you that what happened in the 1990s wasn't because of Israel. It was because of what the United States wanted. That Israel is actually at one period of time, a very critical period of time, on the other side trying to achieve a different result, which implies that the Pentagon, State Department policymakers aren't working necessarily in concert with the Israelis and the pro-Israeli lobby.
Is Russia transferring more weapons to Syria? And I'm talking about
Syria or Iran?
Syria.
I don't know. I mean, it appears that airplanes are flying.
Big airplane going to Syria. The same one came to Iran, if you remember. Then we were talking about big weapons coming to Iran.
Again, I don't know. I mean, I've seen the flights. Logic dictates that there's something on that flight. It'd be interesting to see, because we know that the Israelis just recently attacked a warehouse that's right outside of the perimeter of the Russian base in Syria. Many people thought that maybe they attacked the Russian base itself. In fact, it was so close that the Russian air defense actually engaged many of the incoming missiles. So the Israelis are sensitive about this. It'd be interesting to see what happens if Israel deems that the cargo on any of these flights is detrimental to its national security interests. Would they dare attack a Russian cargo plane? It's a dangerous game the Israelis are playing, but we know that Russia has, we say we know, reports are that Russia has approved the sale and may have actually transferred, several batteries of S-400 surface-to-air missiles, facilitating the transfer of a number of Su-35 advanced Generation 4 plus fighters to Iran. I don't know what they're doing with Syria. Maybe an upgrade to Syrian air defense, because Israel has just been bombing Syria at will, and it's sort of embarrassing for the Syrians. So maybe Russia is going to upgrade their air defense systems as well. I don't know.
And how about right now in Ukraine, Scott?
Say again?
In Ukraine, right now, Ogledar is in the hand of Russians. It seems that it was a very strategic city for Ukrainians. But how about Russian? How important is that for Russians? And how would that mean for the next step on the part of Russians?
Well, let me make it as clear as possible. Uladar is a urban area in Zaporizhia. Zaporizhia is Russia. So ask me that question again. How important is it to Russia? Every inch of Russian soil is important to Russia. Russia's not playing the game on other people's territories right now. I mean, Uladar had a certain strategic relevance. The Ukrainians had fortified it. It was the anchor of the Ukrainian defenses. It had frustrated Russia for 2 years now. That had been repeatedly trying to take it. So, from a military standpoint, Russia finally took what had been one of its objectives, an anchor to the Ukrainian defenses in Zaporizhia, which will unhinge that line and compel the Ukrainians to fall back and dig in another line. Will there be a second Uladar? I don't know. But I don't think, sometimes we lose sight of the fact that Russia's not stopping this war till every inch of Russian territory has been returned to Russia. And all of Zaporizhia is considered by Russia to be Russian. All of Donetsk, all of Lugansk, all of Kherson, including the right bank. So from the Russian perspective right now, as stated, their goals and objectives are to regain control of all the territory that is legally Russian. And for all the people that are talking about, well, they're going to draw a new line and freeze it where it is, constitutionally, that's sort of impossible to do, because that would require the Russians to say, we're giving up Russian soil. Now, people say, well, you've never really occupied it other than the right bank and maybe some places in Donetsk that they had and then they withdrew, but I think they've captured them again. It doesn't matter. The oblast, the region of Zaporizhia, is Russia from a Russian perspective, constitutionally. All of it belongs to Russia, every square inch. And Russia, I don't see any mechanism where Russia, short of being defeated, stops the conflict. So no matter what happens, those territories will all be returned to Russia, which means Ukrainians are going to have to leave. Now, if Ukrainians are fortunate enough, then the Russians won't make a demand on additional territories: Odessa, Kharkov, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv. Russia has a legitimate claim on all of these because all of them have been used to launch attacks against Russian territory. We'll see what happens, but understand that Russia will do whatever it takes to regain control of every inch of Russian territory. And the only way to stop Russia from doing that is to defeat Russia. And right now, I don't see Russia being defeated on the battlefield.
Does Russia consider Odessa and Nikolaev as its cities?
Well, I mean, the two questions, legally or historically? Historically, yes. They consider Odessa, Nikolaev, Kharkov, Sumy, these are Russian cities with significant Russian-speaking populations. Legally, Russia hasn't made a claim on these cities at all. You've not seen Russia say anything other than the territories that are Russia belong to Russia, and we will occupy them. There may be, some modalities in a post-conflict reality that call for demilitarization of these territories, etc. But as of yet, Russia has not made a claim on these territories. Could that change? Absolutely. I would say that, depending on what the final outcome is, if you get a Ukraine that totally capitulates, where Russia is in total control of the political entity, then I don't see the need to transfer Odessa to Russian control. But if the conflict ends with a Ukraine that has a modicum of independence in terms of governance, Russia can never again allow Ukraine to be Ukraine to control Odessa because of the threat Odessa poses on Crimea. The same thing with Sumy and Kharkov. These two districts have forfeited their right to have independence because Ukraine has used them to launch attacks into Kursk and into Belgorod. That's unforgivable from the Russian standpoint. And again, for all the people out there saying, tough luck, Russia, just put it, again, imagine the United States and imagine this happening to us, and then imagine what we would do, and then stop being hypocritical. Russia's going to do what Russia needs to do to protect Russian interests. And they're sort of not in the mood to negotiate anymore. I get a chuckle when I hear, former Secretary General, Stoltenberg and the new one, Ritter, and everybody else, talking about this, that, and the other thing. They don't count. I mean, you think Russia cares? Russia doesn't care about them anymore. Doesn't pay attention. It's just talk. Russia's in the business of winning this war, which means whatever you want to bring to Ukraine, Russia will consume, eat, spit out, chew out, kill, destroy, and keep moving. That's the reality.
Lavrov today was talking about long-range missiles. It seems that there's still concern about the United States sending long-range missiles to Ukraine. Do you think that the Biden administration would risk to send these long-range missiles to Ukraine before 2024 presidential election?
I don't think it's a matter of before or after. It's a nuclear war if they do. So I think Russia made that point as clear as possible, that if you do that, there will be consequences, and these consequences will be dire. And then if people want to know what dire means, go buy Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War Scenario, and read it, and you'll understand how in 72 minutes the entire world ends. That's the consequences, guys. My wife always tells me, don't read the comments. Don't read the comments. For all you stupid people out there, and I call you stupid, and I'd call it to you in your face, because this gets insulting after, not me personally, but humanity. All the things you're advocating for will inevitably lead to the destruction of the entire world. Now, you're sitting there playing stupid troll games. That's fine. You can do that. Free speech. Yay. Good job. But understand the consequences of what you're talking about. And this is where the rest of you have to get pissed off, because you're literally talking about killing you. The interesting thing about Annie Jacobson's book, I just bought it this last weekend and spent all day Sunday reading it back and forth twice, is that while it's a work of fiction, it's derived from interviews she had with the guys who will do all the jobs that are mentioned in the book. So she didn't make anything up. It's there, how things would happen, decisions that would have to be made, etc. And the frustrating thing is how at some point in time the nuclear employment plan, the nuclear posture goes on full automatic, and rational thought no longer applies. I mean, when you have, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon, knowing the nuclear weapon's going to hit him and he's going to be dead in 36 seconds, still pretending as he was in command, issuing orders. When the world has already ended and you have the head of Strategic Command in his airborne command post coordinating the launch of missiles to kill even millions of more people, hundreds of millions of more people, even though soon he's going to run out of fuel and there's no place to land and he's going to die too. It's on full automatic. The world ends automatically. So anybody out there thinking, well, no rational person would let this happen. It's on full automatic. And all you have to do is cross that initial threshold. So for all you idiots out there talking about let's give the Ukrainians the weapons so they can strike targets deep inside Russia, that's the initial threshold. All right? And everybody else needs to act accordingly. So, these trolls, pound sand, go to hell, die. I don't care. But stop being stupid, because you're literally saying you want to commit suicide. And that's your business if all you want to do is take yourself out. But the policies that you're promulgating are policies that will lead to the deaths of humanity. Because once you have a war on the scope and scale of a general nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia, which, by the way, is automatic once any initial threshold has been crossed. That's the interesting thing. It doesn't matter. The thing that Annie Jacobson brings up, you say, well, if the United States goes to a nuclear war with North Korea, it doesn't matter. If we fire 150 Minuteman III to North Korea, how do they get there? All you rocket scientists. They have to overfly Russian soil. And now the Russians are looking at 150 missiles coming in and going, that could also be a decapitating strike against all our stuff. Let's say the Russians don't fire, but now these missiles hit inside North Korea and the radioactive fallout goes into Vladivostok and kills 4 million people. I think the Russians just take that and go, oh, that's okay. What happens when the Chinese, when the radiation hits North Korean sites, goes across to China and kills 20 million people? Chinese are going to go, oh, that's okay too? There's no limiting this stuff. It's insane. It's insane. Once it starts, you can't fire. The Trident missiles are the most destabilizing missile in our arsenal, because the second they're launched at any target, North Korea or anywhere, the people who are potential nuclear adversaries of the United States have to assume that this is a preemptive decapitation strike against them, whether you're China or Russia. And since they operate on what's called launch on detect, which we have, by the way, too, the second you detect a launch that has a probability of a nuclear strike on your soil, you must launch everything, because you can't afford to leave anything in the ground. So everything gets launched. Yeah, I got it, you pro-Ukrainian trolls out there. Pound sand, kiss my ass. I don't care. But stop. I just want everybody else to realize how stupid this line of thinking is. You don't have to agree with me on anything. You can say, Scott, you're wrong on Ukraine. Scott, you're wrong on Iran. I ain't wrong on nuclear war, guys. And I'm not willing to gamble to be proven wrong. All right? Having Ukraine at this stage in the conflict, or at any stage in the conflict, seek to turn things around by firing long-range missiles, foreign-made, into Russian soil, isn't going to change the outcome of the war in Ukraine, but it could very well determine the fate of all humanity.
J.D. Vance, in a new article, Scott, in the American Conservative, he's talking about the points that in his mind that would put an end to the conflict in Ukraine. And the main point, the first point that he says that Russia receives already occupied territories, and which is in the hand of Russians. And it seems that he doesn't consider Ukraine being part of NATO. And the third part of this article says Germany restores Ukraine. How, in your opinion, why every time he's talking about Ukraine, he's talking about Germany? building up Ukraine. What's in it for Germany, and why they have destroyed Germany's economy, and right now they want Germany to build Ukraine? And where is the root of this type of mindset?
Ignorance. Ignorance, plain so. J.D. Vance, I mean, I respect the guy. I mean, he's a senator, state of Ohio. Former Marine. Well, not really. He graduated boot camp and then became a combat correspondent. And he did a tour in Iraq where he reported on the air wing activities. His job needs to be done. But you understand the strategic insight a corporal has, because that's the rank he got out as. Most of his time was spent as a lance corporal. So an E3. No disrespect to E3s. They're the heart and, they're the meat and bones of all military organizations, but they have no clue whatsoever about the big picture, even in their unit. They don't know anything about the logistics that goes into making their unit work. They don't sit there and do the logistical planning. They don't do the operational planning. They're just the nuts and bolts. And so J.D. Vance emerged from the Marine Corps with zero understanding of anything in the world. Hate to say it to you, J.D., but it's true. And the proof is that you haven't carried any lessons you may have learned by your military service over into, the policies you promulgate today. Total ignorance. He doesn't know anything about Ukraine, nothing. He doesn't know anything about Israel or Iran, nothing. He doesn't know anything about Germany, nothing. What he does know is that, he listens to the pulse of the people here in the United States, and he senses a growing frustration about the Ukraine conflict. But because he doesn't know anything about it, and he's loath to say anything that could be spun as being sympathetic to Putin, like, hey, JD, why don't you take advantage of the people you have access to now, find out about the CIA's relationship with the organization Ukrainian Nationalists, the Bandera Wing, how we funded them from 1948 and up until 1990, how we continue to fund them today, how we use them to fulfill, to foment a coup d'etat in 2014, how the CIA has been working with them in secret since then to do X, Y, and Z. And then you might understand the source of Russia's angst. But he doesn't do that. So what he knows is that the war has to come to an end. So he picks the politically expedient thing, thinking that Russia's ready for this war to come to an end. I mean, did he talk to the Russians? JD, did you talk to the Russians? And say, hey, if we freeze it right now where it's at, constitutionally, you guys okay with that? You'll give up all those territories that, constitutionally you say belong to you, but you'll give them up, right? Just to bring this war an end, to make me happy, to fulfill my campaign pledge, to make the voters know how to vote for me more, and to make America. Russia's not going to go along with this. This is stupidity in the extreme. Stupidity in the extreme. The same thing, Germany. Germany's economy is collapsing as we speak. The idea that Germany, A, has the economic wherewithal, and B, the political will to take responsibility for building up. But it's a throwaway statement that JD put out there because he wants Europe to be rebuilding. That he wants Ukraine to be, linked, because somebody briefed him how the Germans are close with the Banderas. Oh, they are, by the way. The German intelligence service. When it was created, the B&D was originally part of, this General Galen's Eastern Intelligence Network, sort of. And one of the things the Eastern Intelligence Network did is work with the Banderists while the Nazis occupied the former Soviet territories, the former Polish territories, Belarusian territories. And even after the Germans pulled out, they would parachute in these teams that would hook up with them and coordinate this. And the Germans were supplying it up until the very end, receiving intelligence up until the very end. And when the war ended and American military intelligence came in, they said, oh, don't stop receiving that intelligence. Keep those systems alive. We want to know what's going on. And so these Nazis, literal war criminals, were kept alive, formed, organized, worked for the United States, later worked for the CIA. We took over that, and we've been working with the Banderas, who are literal Nazis, ever since. And the Germans have been part and parcel of that. So maybe JD knew about that. I doubt he did, though. But I think he understands that there's some connectivity between the Germans and the Ukrainians from a historical standpoint, and that somehow that would be conducive to Germany overseeing the reconstruction. But the reality is Europe can't reconstruct Ukraine. Europe doesn't have enough money to reconstruct Ukraine. And when this is done, I don't know if Russia is going to want Ukraine to be reconstructed by Europe. I think actually Ukraine is going to be reconstructed by BRICS, and that's going to keep Ukraine into the Russian orbit. That's the fate of Ukraine. Ukraine could have been an independent entity as recently as June had they accepted Vladimir Putin's terms, which are basically an extension of the April 2022 terms, the so-called Istanbul Communique, modified to take into account the reality of Russia's ownership of Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Zelensky said no. Now he's going to pay the price, but Germany's not going to rebuild. J.D. Vance is dumber than dirt. Donald Trump's dumber than dirt. This is a man who thinks he's going to pick up the phone and convince Vladimir Putin to do whatever he wants. Joe Biden, we know, is dumber than dirt. Kamala Harris, that would be, too. None of them understand the realities that they're in right now. The United States doesn't have a vote unless it wants a nuclear war. Other than that, we've become irrelevant because what more can we do? That's the question that has to be asked. What more can we do? And then when you define what we can do, then the question has to be asked, how much more will we actually do? Just because we can do it doesn't mean that politically it will be supported. And I think Americans are tired of giving money away to Ukraine. That's the bottom line, especially, after, the Hurricane Helene. And now we've got, I forget, is it Martin? Is that the one coming in next? Or Marvin or Martin? Supposed to be category 5, category 6, unprecedented damage is going to happen. And remember, these are, if Biden thinks he's winning Florida, he's crazy. And if he thinks he's winning Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, he's even crazier. If he thinks he's winning Tennessee, he's insane. Because all these people now have seen the reality of the Biden government. Now, it would have been the Trump government. I'm saying Trump would have been in the same position because the U.S. government in general has failed the American people and will continue to fail the American people. But the American people now are looking at how easily we transfer $8 billion to Israel, $8 billion to Ukraine, but we can only give $750 maybe to American citizens in need. So I think the American people are tired. And then every American citizen has to ask themselves, what happens if it comes to me? What happens if there's an earthquake in California? The United States government will abandon you every much as we abandon people. In upstate New York, what happens is there's a catastrophe there. Out west, massive wildfires. The U.S. government will abandon you because they don't care about you. They do care about Israel, apparently. They do care about Ukraine. They'll pour good money after bad there, but they're not going to give the money to the American people that the American people need. And even Trump has said, I think people wake up. He won't send aid to California because California didn't vote for him. Well, don't run for president, you idiot. Get used to the fact that even if you're president, it means a lot of Americans didn't vote for you. If you're lucky, only 40% didn't vote for you. If you're unlucky, 49% didn't vote for you. But the bottom line is you're not a dictator. You don't have a complete mandate, and you have to serve all of the people, even those who didn't vote for you. And yet he's out there saying straight up, I'm not going to send aid money to California because of Gavin Newsom and California politics. I'm sorry, Mr. Wannabe president. That dog don't hunt. I mean, the bottom line is we don't have a qualified person running for president. J.D. Vance is an idiot. Donald Trump's a buffoon. Joe Biden's senile, and Kamala Harris is fake. That's it. We got Jill Stein.
Good one. Scott, when we look at the bigger picture of the world, in Ukraine, we've passed the breaking point between the United States and Russia, and the situation is so dangerous right now. And in the Middle East, we are approaching a breaking point and a major war between Iran and Israel. And if Trump wins, we can definitely say that the situation between the United States and China would worsen. And how do you see the diplomacy, the current state of diplomacy in the United States, and how do you see the future? Do we have any sort of hope to have at least somebody in Washington to talk with these powers and these military powers, these regional powers, global powers?
There's no diplomacy right now. We don't do diplomacy. We dictate. We dictate solutions. We dictate outcomes. The National Security Strategy in the United States, published by the Biden administration in 2022, said that the maintenance of the rules-based international order is the foundation of American foreign policy. That means the maintenance of American global hegemony. The world is rejecting that. We see that with BRICS. It's just not happening. And even the Biden administration admits that's the case. But we don't have a plan B to fall back on. We don't have, diplomats out there trying to, implement a mitigating strategy to the collapse of American influence around the world. Russia just pulled a genuine diplomat, Anatoly Antonov, out of the United States. He'd been serving here since 2017. I had the honor and privilege to have lunch with him on a number of occasions and to attend functions at the embassy where I was able to talk with him. The man negotiated the last arms control treaty between Russia and the United States, the New START treaty in 2010. The man is an expert on America, speaks fluent English, understands our country better than many Americans understand it. And yet for 7 years, he was ignored by the United States. And his last major action as a diplomat was to tell the United States that if you fire these long-range missiles into Russia, there will be a nuclear war. Imagine that, a man who wanted to promote arms control, a man who wanted to promote good relations with the United States and Russia, his last official act was to say, we will go to nuclear war against you. So he's gone. He left. Who knows who's going to replace him, but doesn't matter because we don't talk to them. We ignored them. It was frustrating to go to the embassy and see this man saying, this is my job, and they're not letting me do my job. That's the fact. We don't have diplomats anymore. We have, because a diplomat requires, you speak to Chas Freeman, Ambassador Freeman. He's a diplomat, quintessential diplomat. He has a deep understanding of the world. He's pro-American, and he will promote pro-American policies, but he understands the consequences of these policies, and he will inform people about, if we do this, this should happen, because he has a deep appreciation for the world that we live in. And he respects the other people as well. Again, he's an American. He will promote American policies, but he will also try to make those policies as realistic and responsible as possible. He was the ambassador to Saudi Arabia during Desert Storm. I can't say I met him at that time. I didn't, but I know of him. I worked closely with the political advisor that advised him, and I read his cables, so I know where he was coming from. Jack Matlock was one of the last, second to last American ambassador to the Soviet Union. He left his job in August of 1991, right before the coup against Gorbachev. But he was there during the critical period of time of disarmament and perestroika, glasnost, etc. Read his book, Anatomy of an Empire, and Anatomy of the Fall of an Empire. It's up here someplace. I just read it, but the depth of comprehension and understanding of the complexities of the Soviet Union and Russia are manifest throughout. Then read Michael McFaul's book about his experience, and you'll see that he has no understanding of Russia, no understanding of anything. He's just a pure propagandist for the United States. To produce a diplomat, to produce a Jack Matlock and a Chas Freeman, you have to have an enterprise that is willing to produce such people, and that starts in academia. You have to have people that can enter into institutions of higher learning, Stanford, Georgetown, Harvard, Yale, all these places where the great minds gather. And those institutions have to allow them to be open in their exploration of these different issues. During the Cold War, people used to go to Leningrad for 6-month tours, go to Moscow for 6-month semesters abroad. Even though it was the Cold War, that was the evil empire, we actively encouraged people to go over and meet these people and talk to them. When the Soviets came here, you would attend their functions, meet them, talk to them. That was encouraged, not because we were afraid, we weren't afraid that the Russians were going, oh my God, if you're exposed to Soviet thinking, you're going to go over. No, we were confident in who we were and what we were, and so confident we said, learn everything you can about them. so that we can effectively interact with them. Today, sadly, that's just literally not what happens. We have people in these institutions that are former CIA, former State Department. These are all ideologues, Russophobes, and their whole job is to create cookie cutter people. My daughter went to Georgetown. She went to the Foreign Institute, Foreign Service Institute, studied Southern Caucasian affairs. That's Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, in relationship to Russia. Had to take some Russian history courses, Russian political courses, Russian language to understand that. I brought her with me to Russia last December in January. She had a unique opportunity to see Russia, to interface. I took her to Chechnya with me. She got to meet Ramzan Kadyrov, have lunch with him, ask him questions. She got to meet Abdialudanov. She got to meet Adam, name escapes me right now. She got to meet all the senior Chechen leadership and talk with them, interact with them. She got to go to museums and have the head of museums talk to her about what she's seeing, go to the big mosque, meet with the imam and talk about the importance of religion in Chechnya. I mean, these are just amazing opportunities. And when she returned to Georgetown, I have to tell you, in my day, had I done a trip like that, my administration would brought me in and said, Scott, we need you to host some seminars. We want to bring people in. We'd like to talk to you. Can you do a special event? My professor said, could you write a paper about that? We're very interested in what you saw, what you learned. Her fellow students said, why don't you quit? You disgrace the institution. How dare you travel there? How dare you meet with Ramzan Kadyrov? How dare you do these things? And this was supported by Georgetown leadership. And I'm like, wait a minute, Georgetown, read your own damn rules. You're violating your own code of conduct, academic ethics. You're supposed to be open-minded, never question people's attempts to learn. And yet she came back knowing things that none of your damn professors know. How many Georgetown professors have met with Ramzan Kadyrov and can talk intelligently about Chechnya's posture vis-a-vis Georgia? None. She could, because she did. Talked to Abdialudanov about the problem of integration of Chechnya in the post-Chechen War conflict. She was there. She was in that conversation. These are important things. It doesn't mean that you yield the floor to Kadyrov's posture and all this stuff. It means that you've educated yourself, you've informed yourself, and now you come back and you contribute this knowledge to a broader debate, discussion, and dialogue about how America deals with this region. Georgetown wasn't interested because they're not interested in free thinkers, the kind of free thinkers we need to have effective diplomacy. We can't have effective diplomacy if we don't have effective diplomats. And if we're not training effective diplomats, we'll never have effective diplomats. So until the entire system is purged and we come in with a new a way of training, we have to purge everything, not just get rid of an administration, but we have to knock out 80% of the teachers in these institutions. We have to purge the ranks of all the people that have closed minds. We have to start bringing in people with open minds so that when we send a diplomat abroad, they are the modern day equivalent of a Chas Freeman and a Jack Matlock, and not just simply a cookie cutter of Michael McFaul.
Can you hear me, Scott?
I can hear you. I can't see you, but
yeah, just let me check it out. What's going on here? Yeah, sorry for that.
Oh, no problem. I mean, maybe we're getting jammed.
Yeah, I think
YouTube's been kicking off everybody who has me on. So,
And Scott, when you talk about the situation right now in the United States, but on the other hand, we have Iran, Russia, and China. How do they think about the situation, in your opinion? How do they find, are they, the question would be, in the way that you're describing the situation in the United States, that would bring some sort of shock to these countries because they want to negotiate, they want to talk with the United States. But do you think at the end of the day, these hardliners in these countries would prevail to not to talk with Washington, to go after some sort of aggressive attitude toward the United States?
Let me put it this way. If you think of diplomacy as control rod, imagine the world's geopolitical system as a nuclear reactor. And if we don't have diplomacy, it'll blow up. It'll go critical and blow up. Diplomacy are the control rods that are inserted into the reactor to keep it under control, to keep it functioning, keep it moving. So you need that. Now, each control rod is a different part of the world. So, if you lose a certain number of control rods, it's going to start overheating, and you need to reinsert them, or you're going to have a problem. Now, each one is its own little universe. Let's focus on Russia and America for a second. Back in the Cold War, when Russia was the evil empire, we engaged in diplomacy like you wouldn't believe, across the board. And the Soviet Foreign Ministry and the Department of State had, a variety of offices that dealt with all the ways America interacted with the Soviet Union. And each office had the phone number of their counterpart, and you had the phone book. And so you say, oh, let's say I'm the desk officer for, I don't know, avian flu. And someone said, Scott, the European sparrow, I'm not going to go into a Mighty Python skit. European sparrows are starting to drop dead. And we don't understand it, but the migration path of the European sparrow takes it over, Armenia and Azerbaijan through Georgia into Turkey. Could you find out if anything's going on? I open up the phone book and I look over, and I got my Soviet counterpart, European sparrow. I've met at a couple conferences. I've gone to European sparrow conferences and avian flu conferences. We've met, we've talked. I met his wife on occasion. I introduced him to my wife and all that stuff. So I know who he is. Call him up. Hey, Sergey, how you doing? Yeah, it's Scott. Hey, got a question, man. I mean, what you can tell me, but what do you know about European sparrows dropping dead in Armenia? Is anything like this happening? Hey, Scott, I don't, it's not crossed my radar, but I'll get back to you. I'll look at it. And he would come back and go, yeah, look, let's say it's sensitive. Let's say there was a nuclear accident. You can't talk about it. Scott, what I'm going to tell you right now is I can't tell you anything. Understand the situation I'm in. That tells me everything. Then I come back and I say, something might be happening in Armenia. Or you can say, no, man, there's nothing going on. We've been doing it. I have some data I can send you, and we talk. We're not making treaties. We're not making policy. We're talking, we're communicating, and we're making problems go away before they manifest themselves. And that happened from the bottom of the phone book all the way up to the top of the phone book, that kind of connectivity taking place. When I spoke to Russian diplomats over the course of the last few years, we would talk about the phone book. They said, well, for a while, we continued to staff, and this especially happened during the Trump administration, because Trump came in and just refused to fill a lot of these positions in the State Department, because he's Donald Trump and he's the smartest man in the world, and these stupid bureaucrats can't do anything right, So he just didn't fill them. And they said, well, we were there, but I mean, why pay a guy to sit at a desk when there's nobody on the other end? They pick up the phone, they call, nobody answers. Pick up the phone, they call, nobody answers. So we reassign them. And what happens if you don't exercise the muscle of diplomacy is it atrophies. The body adapts. We don't know how to do diplomacy anymore because we don't have the various mechanisms in place. And it's the same thing to a lesser degree with China, because what we tend to do is dictate, not negotiate. We dictate outcomes. And so when we're in the business of dictating, you don't need all these desk officers, because there's nothing that can be done. They're waiting for the dictation to take place. And so the Chinese and the Americans, that diplomacy is starting to atrophy as well. Not as bad as what's happened with Russia. It's a real tragedy. It's very dangerous because, again, arms control. We spent decades from the late 1960s all the way up till 2010 building the muscle of arms control in diplomacy. Now, we had, John Kennedy built a agency called the Arms Control Disarmament Agency in 1961, totally dedicated to arms control. Imagine that. And it worked. till 1999 when Bill Clinton went, superfluous, get rid of it, and we'll drop down its functions to other places. But by diluting that, what you're saying is arms control not important anymore. It's not important to us anymore. And what happened is the nuclear infrastructure that used to have to deal with the Arms Control Disarmament Agency from a negotiation standpoint, making sure that everything we did complied with the intent of disarmament set forth by the executive, that wasn't there anymore. And they took over. And having the military in charge of nuclear policies, like having the fox guard the chicken, the hen house, all the eggs are going to go gone and the hens are going to get eaten. Can't have that. But we don't have that anymore. We don't know how to do arms control anymore. We don't have, the Paul Nietzsche's or the Warnke's and these geniuses that grew up during the Cold War and understood it, knew all of their Russian and Soviet counterparts, and they knew how they thought. They understood how to make things happen. That's all gone, and nobody's doing it. We don't do arms control anymore. There's nobody that does it. So, how do we, at this most critical time in the nuclear era, where we need arms control now more than ever, we need people to be talking, working. We don't have anybody that does it. It's atrophied. We're going to have to reinvent the wheel, and this isn't the time. This is like being in a Formula One race, and you know how the car comes in. You need the pit crew to come out and pop, 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 pop with the tires to gas it up and get going. This is like in the middle of the race, saying, get rid of the pit crew and let's bring in the high school home economics class. Hey guys, you've been to auto, you guys learned what a car looks like. Well, today you're going to be the pit crew for a Formula One crew. You're like, what? And the car comes in and nothing's going to happen because they have no clue what they're doing. They don't even know. And it's a disaster. That's what arms control negotiations look like today. We have nobody qualified to do it because we haven't trained anybody. So what happens is we pick ideologues that come out of those institutions who are Russophobes. To give you an example of how dangerous this is, during the Trump administration, they had an assistant secretary of defense who gave a presentation at the Arms Control Association where he literally said it is the goal and objective of the Trump administration for Chinese and Russian leadership to wake up every morning not knowing whether or not today's the day America is going to nuke them. That's dead serious. He said it. Do you understand the insanity of what I just said? That the goal was to have the Russians and the Chinese wake up every morning not knowing whether today was the day America was going to nuke them. Imagine if the Russians came out and said, that's our goal. We want Americans to wake up every morning not knowing whether or not we're going to nuke them. We turn around and say, well, Christ, guys, we got to be ready for this. Let's get our nuclear forces forward deployed, ready, hair trigger, in case they come at us, launch on detect. We got to go. We got to go. We got to be ready to go. And you don't have anybody going, time out, back up. Let's work this thing through. We don't want anybody waking up in the morning to think anybody's ready to nuke them. So how do we make that? We detarget we used to do that. We detargeted our ICBMs. That meant that they're sitting in the silo dumb. So if there's ever an accident, fire, they just go and they don't go anywhere. But now, no, we have a certain number of them already preloaded, ready with the war plan. Same thing with our Trident submarines. It's just the reality that we're at today because we don't do arms control anymore. We don't have, it's not only that we've lost the muscle memory, we don't have the muscle. We got nothing. We got to start over. So that's why, I'd like to hear from Donald Trump. I know that RFK Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. wrote a nice, interesting piece in The Hill, and I appreciate the effort that went into that. But there's no mention of arms control. RFK Jr. is a big proponent of his father, Jack, or his uncle, Jack. I'd like to hear him talk about what the Trump administration is going to do to create a new arms control disarmament agency. How's arms control going to factor into that? Hell, I'd like to hear Jill Stein say that. She has a brief statement about we will support general nuclear disarmament. How are you going to do that, Jill? Are you going to create the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency? How are you going to make arms control work? How are you going to walk down from the current nuclear employment plan? What argument will you make to Congress that says you actually know what the hell you're talking about so that they can support you walking down from a nuclear employment plan? What is your nuclear posture going to be? Is it going to be launch on detect, or is it going to be sole purpose deterrence only? And if you need help knowing about this, Jill, there's people out there willing to talk to you. But if you continue to ignore it and just move forward, we lose confidence in you. And we know that the Biden administration isn't going to do a damn thing because Joe Biden, although he gave lip service to sole purpose doctrine when he ran for president, as soon as he became president, he recertified launch on detect, preemptive nuclear strike, and now he's expanded the nuclear employment in very dangerous ways that create the possibility for inadvertent nuclear conflict at any time. And Kamala Harris is just too stupid to live. She doesn't know anything about anything I've just said, and I don't know if she could ever be brought up to speed on it because, again, she lacks the cognitive capability. So we're in a lot of trouble. We need to make nuclear disarmament one of our top priorities as a nation so that when people say they want to be the chief executive of the United States, they understand how important it is for them to get, read up on this issue. But right now, nope, the American people don't care. We're not talking about it. So why should the politicians talk about it? And the military is not going to let the State Department get involved. They're just going to say, we got it under control. Read Annie Jacobson's book, and let me tell you what happens when the military says they have it under control. That means they're going to launch all of their nuclear weapons anytime they want to, anytime they feel like it. Read the book. I'm not making it up.